items? I don't think so. Hope not. Right, and now we move to notice of motion. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and morning colleagues and members of the public. This has been a matter which has dragged on for some years. It goes back right to the beginning of the Super City, when complaints started coming in, mainly from Waiheke Island, and they were so vehement that the first chief executive of the council, Doug Mackay, took over the file himself to try and deal with the matter. Of course, the matter hasn't been dealt with. I guess the present process through local boards to the governing body began with a petition from Waiheke Islanders led by Mr. Kim Willoughby, where in a very short time he gathered 1,300 signatures for the council or the governing body to stop helipads on Waiheke Island. Around about the same time, there was a 600-word petition from Aotea Great Barrier, 600-name petition, sorry. 600 names is about every adult on the island, so it's overwhelming. And I think it was in December 2021, the governing body looked at it and put forward a raft of resolutions and had the intention of trying to do something about it. I have to say that Aotea Great Barrier in many ways led the charge, but the Waitemata local board at that time had a similar position to, if they wanted, the Aotea Great Barrier local board wanted a moratorium on consents, which sounds reasonable enough, but the staff are very quick to point out that's not legal under RMA. You can't have moratoriums under RMA, and we must stick to the letter of the law. So then the local board said, well, we would prefer prohibited activity if we can't have a moratorium. Well, that's not really suitable, it's not doable, it's too high a bar, but it is legal. It is enabled under RMA and always has been, and also was enabled in the Town and Country Planning Act before that. RMA, what, 31 years ago, it has, prohibited activity has survived all those reviews, all those changes, all those amendments, all the streamlining and all the cutting of red tape. Prohibited activity is still in there for a very good reason. It was upheld by the Court of Appeal from a challenge by the mining industry and the Ministry of Economic Development wanted to get rid of prohibited activity. It was opposed by Coromandel Watchdog, Auckland City Council and Auckland Regional Council, and the good guys won. So it's still there. In our own unitary plan, we have prohibited activities. If you hear that, if you read the consultant's report, it seems like something like prohibited activity is completely off the wall and impractical, unfeasible, and so on. However, we have prohibited activity relating to genetically modified organisms. We have prohibited activity relating to subdivision in the foothills of the Waitakere Ranges. We have prohibited activity in the Auckland Unitary Plan relating to subdivision in rural areas. We have prohibited activity relating to the discharge of dairy waste to water. We have prohibited activity relating to the discharge of biosolids to water. So we already have prohibited activity. It's there because it's an essential tool when it comes to the sustainable management of natural and physical resources. Members, there's also a health and safety question here. Not only is that noise shatteringly intrusive for the ratepayers who have to live next to these residential helipads, but there is a question, an obvious question of safety here. Having aircraft land in residential neighbourhoods is not especially safe and is not risk-free. I'm just amazed that that issue hasn't been addressed more closely. Across the Tasman and Sydney, how do they deal with helipads? Well, under the Sydney Local Environmental Plan, LEP, land use zones in which a helipad may be permissible or prohibited are as below. General residential, prohibited. Neighbourhood, prohibited. Commercial core, prohibited. Business developments, prohibited. Business park, prohibited. General industrial, prohibited. Enterprise corridor, prohibited. Everywhere else it's okay. And I think that's a good example here, because what the three sister local boards are arguing here and advising us here in response to their communities is this. Let's make helipads prohibited in residential areas. In the rest of the district and the rest of the, say, the islands, that's okay, we'll make it non-complying. Non-complying is what helipads are on the mainland of Auckland in the AUP. And so what we are saying here with the support of the Waitemata Local Board, which originally asked for prohibited activity during its last term, was persuaded to modify that somewhat. They have gone back to the original stand and are very, very firm on it and unanimous. All the local boards are unanimous on this, and so what the solution they are putting towards the governing body to this regional council is this. The Hauriki Gulf Islands District Plan and the Auckland Unitary Plan will need to be amalgamated. Staff have budgeted for it. It seems to be put off time and again, however, probably because of COVID or something. Anyway, the solution is this. The non-complying activity which relates to the Auckland Unitary Plan should be upheld, except in residential areas, and therefore on Waiheke and on the mainland, it's a similar planning regime, and so it should be under the Resource Management Act, under the effects-based philosophy of the Resource Management Act. Staff in a report somewhere here talk about they've made it much more permissive on the islands to encourage tourism. Well, guess what? The people of the island feel that they have a sufficient level of tourism now, thank you, and therefore let's revert our planning back to sustainable management, and let's revert our decision-making back to the democratic basis of what the ratepayers, what the people want. So this is a responsibility of the governing body as a regional council. 3 local boards, at least, are unanimous on the position in regard to helipads. They've had enough, their communities have had enough. They want the regional council to intervene as a regional council should and make helipads, which are noisy, intrusive and actually dangerous in residential areas, prohibited in residential areas from now on, and non-complying as they are in the city for the non-residential areas. Same in the city, same on the islands, we're all part of the same regional authority. So members, I seek your goodwill and your help to give this request to our staff to prioritise this plan change, to give relief to the communities who have been pleading to us for a number of years now to do something about it. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, Councillor Lee. Perfectly timed speaking time there, just under 10 minutes, and that your motion has been seconded by Councillor Leone. I'll move to questions, and Councillor Leone, just check that you're definitely online. I know you are, but just verbally that you've definitely seconded this notice of motion. Oh, yes, cool. Sorry, it was a bit hard to hear there. So we'll go to questions, and remember with the notice of motion, it is not like the report we had last year where there are many technical officers here. We don't have that advice. So Councillor Megan Tyler, Chief of Strategy, will be able to answer some questions more generally, but the questions can be to obviously Councillor Lee in the first. No worries, Councillor. Councillor Dalton, Deputy Chair, first, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lee, for your notice of motion and the advocacy you have for the local boards and constituents. Look, my question for you, Councillor Lee, is in March 2023, this committee supported the requests, as in the resolutions, for helipads. But that was to be in the review of the Auckland Unitary Plan, and that work starts in July. I just need to seek some clarity. Are you asking for this piece of work around prohibition to be brought forward to now, before the work starts of planning the review in July? And if so, what gets deprioritised so that can happen in terms of the resourcing? And examples would be the work we are currently doing for natural hazards, Plan Change 78, and of course a huge amount of submissions we're making on the multiple NPS changes by the current government.
Thank you, Councillor Dalton. It's really getting into the area of management here. We're on the democratic side of the business, relaying the concerns and aspirations of the local boards, and behind the local boards, the community. 1 year ago, we asked staff to prioritise a plan change, including the possibility of prohibited activity. That's not been done. Now, I don't want to go into that. There'll be reasons for that, but it hasn't been done, even though we asked. I understand, I've been advised that there is budget available from underspend. So I won't go into the budget lines, but there is a budget available to give this priority. I think we're up to plan change 88. So these plan changes keep coming through, but this is not at the behest of Kainga Ora or the New Zealand Property Council or the other big players that get the plan changes through and the building heights put up again and again and again. This is the ordinary people, the citizens of Auckland, and the people in the areas most impacted by council's policy, which we have imposed on the community without their assent.
Could I have a question of Megan?
Yeah, sure.
Megan, is there budget underspend to be able to undertake this work right now?
Through the Chair, no, we don't have any budget underspend for this kind of work, no.
Thank you, Megan.
I believe the underspend is in policy, but I'm a wee bit at a loss here. But I understand on good advice, so it's all in the wording. And where there's a will, there's a way, and when there's not a will, it becomes difficult, and democracy starts to break down.
Councillor Darby, question.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Mike Lee. My question is for the Chief of Strategy. So, Megan, we've dealt with this a couple of times, and not these particular words, but recognising Councillor Lee's work here. and the work is commencing in July on the review of the unitary plan. My understanding from looking at this before and wanting a similar prohibition status, but probably the outcome much more broad, would these words narrow down your review in terms of helicopter controls? I am thinking this is mainly focused on, say, if we look on the mainland, not the islands, on residential areas. If I look at where Aucklanders are increasingly living, it is in the major centres, the metro centres, which would not be covered by this. I can think of an apartment development that is about to proceed on the Bayswater Peninsula, which is in a marina zone, which would not be covered by this. It wouldn't apply to areas like rural conservation zone, because it's rural, not residential. And it wouldn't apply to the future urban zone. So I'm just wanting you to cast your mind on to what would the review encompass? Would it encompass all of Auckland when we looked at helipad, helicopter landing controls, or would it be a narrow, focused on residential? I guess I'm interested in a holistic look as opposed to a narrow look, because I see the problems just being moved, shunted across to zones that may not have a prohibition on them, like the business zones and sensitive rural and coastal areas, etc.
Through the Chair, that's a really hard question to answer. I think any direction like this, for example, if this passed, we would need to focus, as you say, effectively on the residential areas, residential zoned areas, on the islands and in the isthmus. However, to do a good job and a better job, we would need to kind of look at it holistically, as you say, and then say, well, look, if we made changes in these areas, does there also need to be consequential changes? Does that still make sense, say, at a regional level for some of the other zones or some of the other activities? I guess I can't absolutely promise that we would do that, but we would need to take a wider kind of view that if we were directed to make these changes, what kind of consequential changes, if any, would happen in other zones or in other kind of activities. Yeah.
Can I just respond to that also, because
Councillor Lee.
Can I ask you the question,
Sure.
Councillor Lee? Would that be the better way? So, Councillor Lee, I'm concerned that it doesn't extend into, say, future urban zone. That's the future residential in part. There'll be other subzones of that, but that's where Aucklanders will be living in the future. So there's a scenario whereby if there is a prohibition on the residential areas, but a future residential area is arriving in 2028 through plan change, our own, or a private plan change, somebody could leapfrog, get the consent now ahead of the residential zone being applied, because your motion doesn't cover the future urban zone. It doesn't. There's some other areas that concern me too, and then you can address, like the coastal ferry terminal zone that I've just given you. There's also there's some rural areas. There's rural coastal zone, rural conservation zone. There are a number of other categories that are sensitive environments where people may not be impacted, but that the natural environment is impacted. So I'm just wondering if you could explain why you've narrowed it to residential and not the other zones where I think there are some significant issues as well.
well, obviously, as elected people, we're not planning professionals. However, we are obliged to respond to the concerns of our communities as democratically elected people. You will see in my notice of motion that the change we are looking for is in residential areas. Now, you can define that as it is zoned in the AUP, residential, or you could logically, if there's a gap there where people are living, where people are residing in apartments or wherever in the future, you could certainly, that does not exclude that protection going to those people. However, you said we haven't mentioned the other parts apart from of the region, apart from residential or settlement areas. What we are saying in regard to other parts of the region, rural and so on, status quo pertains. Now, it may be that you feel that is inadequate, and then, for good reason, then it's up to us, to you and all of us, to respond if there are any gaps, if you like, in the protection we're trying to give to our communities. It's not in any way exclusive, and it's not meant to be exhaustive or completely a comprehensive review. It's asking for the staff to review the situation on the Gulf Islands and in the city in the Western Bays, to give those people who've been complaining for some years some protection so that they can have the peaceful enjoyment of their homes and properties, which they are paying rates so heavily for right now. So that's my response.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Look, honestly, I think my question is probably more appropriately put to the Chief of Strategy, but feel free to chime in. How will the reprioritisation of workload this involves affect our work on responding to the housing reforms?
Through the Chair, thanks for the question. Look, I think it may well do, and so what I would do, that if this is passed, I would work with the Chair and Deputy Chair to look at that. We know that we've got a substantial workload on already, and it feels like the government's going to be doing some more, and that's what I've been trying to raise, I hope not unhelpfully or obstructively, but there is going to be a resourcing impact on us, and I am concerned about what the government might be coming out that we need to respond to as well, that we might not know about yet. But I would work with the Chair and Deputy Chair around that.
Thank you, two more, and thanks for being available for questions, by the way. Is it possible that this might delay planning work for flood-affected zones of the city?
Yes, it could. I also know that that would not be an outcome that this council would want either, so I just have to work that through.
Last cue, and I'm not sure how much we can say in a public environment, but are there concerns around legal risk with passing this?
Through the Chair, I've been really clear, and I'll say it again if I'm asked, that we don't believe, Councillor Lee is absolutely right that there is a prohibition status in the RMA. That is but you have to be very clear about when that could be used, and I've been very clear that I don't believe that threshold is very high, and I don't believe that this would fit it. I think we would struggle to find the range of technical experts to support us for prohibition.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. So this is just in regard to these amendments that I'm working on to add in the compliance issues that have been raised in Waitemata's resolutions and the Hauraki Gulf Island District Plan issues that Waiheke has raised. So what I'm planning to do is ask this question, get an answer, and then I've got some amendments that I'm going to send through to Councillors Leone and Lee for amendments you might consider by way of addition, because I think we can probably do that in a friendly manner rather than through full amendment process. So Megan, I'm just wanting to understand, so in regard to specifically around the Hauraki Gulf Island District Plan work, so if we did do some work in the short term to amend Rule 13.8.2, which is adding in the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement as a matter of discretion, what impact would that have on workload budgets at your end?
Thanks to the Chair. Yes, it would have an impact. So we obviously haven't budgeted for that, and it's obviously not in our work program. So again, what I would just need to work with the Chair and Deputy Chair is what would fall off or kind of be deferred to enable that to happen, because I'm assuming that would be something, if it goes through, that this committee would want to be done, immediately. And in terms of budget, again, we would just need to spend that money on that plan change as opposed to perhaps what we'd be deferring or stopping as a result.
So can I just get a sense of sort of the size of that piece of work? Because I had sort of thought that might be a smaller process than a full plan change.
Through the chair, yeah, yes it is. So it would be a plan change nonetheless, because you're changing the provisions in the plan, but it would be very discreet. It would be effectively just a line, adding in those words. So the cost is going to be, it would still be in the tens of thousands, but it would be nothing like the hundreds of thousands, and obviously probably into the millions if you're talking about a long appeal period and of course a whole plan change review. So it's still a cost, but it is clearly smaller than, say, what the notice of motion would generate and require.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll send those through to your emails shortly to the mover and seconder. Thanks.
Kia ora, Councillor. Member Ashby.
Kia ora, thank you. Sorry, this might be another question for you. Megan, the question I have is just, I can't quite recollect. It's really, what is the position of Ngāti Rehua and Ngāti Pawa in regards to this? I don't have any clear info on it. And I would like, I can't quite recall from last year what those positions, if any, actually were.
Through the chair, I don't know that. I'm happy to see if we know positions, but I know that I've not spoken to them specifically about this kind of issue.
Do you want me to, could I? Obviously, you'll be aware of the situation where there are two representative bodies representing Ngāti Pawa at the present time, and that's a family business that's for them to sort out. I can tell you in regard to Ngāti Rehua, Ngāti Wai ki Aotea, that they are firmly behind this notice of motion, because they feel that, I was talking to the chair last Friday, in Port Fitzroy there is a kind of search and rescue helipad which is being abused by people on super yachts shuttling, and tourism cruise ships shuttling people back and forward, and with the ear-shattering noise in that bay, they feel it's a violation, but that's not their only concern. So that's my response to that.
Thank you, Councillor. I had vaguely recalled them last year.
Also, this relates to Ngāti Whātua's rohi as well, and the whole region actually. So that is something that will need to be consulted with under law with the different mana whenua groups. But I'm pretty sure that they're not going to be that supportive of special privileges for A-listers over the ordinary working folk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Member Ashby. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Chair. Probably a question for Megan, and then for Mike for just some clarification. Megan, in terms of that, you were just talking about the cost a little bit earlier, and I didn't kind of get the feeling that that need to go through any type of public consultative process. So just clarifying, if this goes through and we have to do that work, is part of that still having to go out to the public and get public feedback?
Through the chair, I'll just be clear. So Councillor Ferry was talking about a possible amendment or a comment she's going to make about just doing the addition of the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement in the current plan as it stands that Chair Handley raised with us. And I said that is a far smaller and more discreet plan change. It would still go out for public consultation. It's the normal Schedule 1 process. Also, clearly, the notice of motion, if we do anything bigger and differently, that still all has public consultation, notification, consultation, hearings, and then, of course, subject to appeal, both of those levels of plan change.
Okay, thanks, Megan. And Mike, just so the public are clear on your position here, a question could be asked, why, for uniformity, just make it non-complying right across the board, including inside residential areas? So why prohibited in the residential versus that perhaps blanket non-complying for right across Auckland?
If we had no practical experience of how non-complying works, it would sound okay. It's obviously a much more stricter level, or theoretically, than restricted discretionary, which was deliberately engineered to be permissive. And so on the face of it, you would say, well, we could, instead of being restricted discretionary, we could have non-complying. That sounds more regulated and with more control. The fact of the matter is, non-complying in the city has proved to be something of a disaster if you happen to live next to the successful applicants who win these non-complying, so-called non-complying consents. And the newspapers have been full of these stories whereby the neighbourhoods are divided and embittered because some zillionaire wants to build a helipad in their mansion without any concern to the effects on their neighbours. And so non-complying has not worked in residential areas in the city. Otherwise, I would say that's the easy way out, because staff are deeply adverse to anything to do with prohibited. It's the way things are. However, prohibited is the only tool that will really work and give people certainty and surety. It doesn't take away any resource consent, existing resource consent, but it puts a stop to a problem which is in many ways is out of control.
Kia ora, thank you, councillors. Are there any other questions? Oh, sorry, Mayor. I didn't put you on the list. Mayor Brown, apologies.
Thanks. These are murky waters to tread into, and I understand the views behind some of this. But on the other hand, we are attempting to look at a broader involvement in helicopters later this year. And it's very hard to do it in one area. I noticed the Waitemata board. I live in the heart of the city, within a kilometre of the hospital. Helicopters go all night long, saving lives, and they're not unsafe. The police helicopter buzzes around all day long. You get used to it. It's not nearly as bad as the sirens. And I know that on Waiheke there are some people against it, but there are other whole businesses out there that survive on helicopters delivering wealthy people to vineyards. So it's easy to say you're representing our community. There's lots of community out of Waiheke. I really understand what is driving this, but I want to ask, do you expect legal challenges if we embark on this? And is it likely to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars if we embark on this? And can you really limit it just to this area? Because as soon as you talk helicopters, I think Councillor Darby pointed out carefully, they go everywhere. And I was up on the helicopter on Saturday afternoon over the Ellerslie Racecourse. No one seemed to complain. We were bringing the cup in, and I was listening to the traffic, and there were only there was 3 helicopters up that afternoon. 2 of them are at Rotorua, which is on the other side of Waiheke, and they were doing tourism for high-end people who are presumably contributing to the economy there. There wasn't a rash of them. Maybe maybe it's the time of the day that these things are there that are pissing people off. Maybe there's another solution, but I'm very loath to launch us accidentally into a huge cost when we're about to do it in the middle of the year.
Through the chair, yeah. So at the middle of the year, we'll kind of start planning for that holistic review of the unitary plan, which will include the Hauriki Gulf Islands. So I just want to be really clear, we wouldn't be starting, helicopter work, for example, as part of that in the middle of the year, but it will be part of that whole process. and is prioritised because that's what you resolved and asked us to do last year. In terms of the cost, it absolutely will be hundreds of thousands. I think it would go into the millions once you add appeals, because this is a topic that absolutely will be appealed. So yeah, it will certainly cost money whenever you do it, whether it's now or later on.
May I respond just quickly to the Mayor's question in regard to Auckland Hospital helipad, which is very carefully managed. As far as where you live, Mr Mayor, you're about at 1.5 kilometres, I think, at least, from with that particular helipad. You're not next door, and it's not in a residential neighbourhood. The Waiheke Vineyards...
Councillor Lee...
The Waiheke Vineyards are not in a residential area. Rotorua Island is not a residential area. That's why we've crafted, with the local boards, that notice of motion very carefully. It's not taking away anyone's current resource consent.
So I'm just clarify that I live under the CAA approved path to the airport, to the hospital, sorry.
Kia ora, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I guess from me, Councillor Lee, and then I can ask Megan, do you have any concerns that the advice is that prohibited, not only we may not be able to get anyone to actually defend our position, but also it might, we've had advice that it would likely fail, and that would be happening concurrently with the full review, which would unlikely happen because to have a plan change going on for prohibited and a full review at the same time wouldn't work. Do you have concerns that it actually would be counterintuitive to do this work based on the advice we've been given?
I think, to be fair, Mr Chairman, the Council has been dealing with this vexed question for at least 3 years now, and prevaricating, kicking the can down the road is not making the problem go away. In the end, there is a huge and growing public concern about this, and therefore we have to grapple with it. If we go through due process in good faith in response to the wishes of our community and our democratic local boards, and you know the Environment Court and the Court of Appeal rule against us, the High Court and the Court of Appeal rule against us, so be it. This council oftentimes goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, if you will, on what are essentially legal squabbles. This is a very important matter, and it's an important environmental matter, and it's a safety issue as well, actually. We should follow the example of Sydney. We're meant to be an international city. This is provincial stuff. Auckland is better than that and needs to be.
Thank you, Councillor. And for Megan, I guess I've asked a bazillion questions on this, but the process from here would be several years before you even, what we expect is the legal action, because of as far as I understand the timing, because we've just seen email come through that the government is now requiring us not to have requiring us to have SNAs, which might have an effect on our SEAs, so our significant ecological areas. The plan changes requiring us to do a myriad of MPSs, as well as this council by majority want us to change Plan Change 78, as well as we've got to add the light rail corridor in, and I must have answered every media agency in Auckland during the 1-year anniversary of the floods of why we are still consenting in floodplains, because we are trying our best to convince ministers to allow us to do those hazard plan changes. I know it's not just about money, it's about resource. Could you just maybe go through, even with the best of intentions, there would be years instead of just doing the review, which is what we agreed last year. We've got, to Chair Hanley's point, is it correct that we have budgeted in the LTP to prioritise this work as part of which is what we all agreed last year?
Yeah, through the chair, let me deal with the last matter first. So, Member Handley probably has not seen a line item that says Hauraki Gulf Island kind of included into Auckland Unitary Plan, but in terms of the request of you in the long-term plan conversations and decisions that you'll be making in a few months' time, we have asked for budget in the kind of more of the middle years of the long-term plan in particular, lots of budget to do exactly that review. So there is budget in there. It won't look like a line item that, say, references Hauraki Gulf Islands. So yes, that's our request of you, and that is a decision you'll need to make. In terms of timing, look, I would just be guessing, but it is months. It's probably at least a year before we would be able to have all of the technical evidence, if we can even get it, to put together this plan change. So the wording itself is probably the least time taken. It's all of the evidence and information that's required to prove or put your case about why these matters need to be prohibited in these zones. So it would be at least a year away. That would go through the public hearing process, as Councillor Sayers has raised. So, and that will be at least another year or two as well. So by the time a decision would be made, it would be some years away, and then of course there may well be appeals. I would expect there absolutely would be appeals. So that's the kind of time frame without being absolutely certain, and then of course the cost that just goes with all of that.
And I guess to make it really clear, because I've pushed, because I agree with you, Councillor Lee, everything you've said today I agree. I guess my situation is I've been asking, and if you could be clear, and I know it's hard to give legal advice, but Megan, why prohibited of a whole region is against advice, you know, as opposed to non-complying or a full review, which we've already supported? Why is that likely to be so hard to prohibit on a region-wide basis? And why is it against advice?
So through the chair, look, it is, you know, we take cognizance of case law. I know Councillor Lee raised some case law. There's not huge amounts, but there is some in relation to prohibited activities. That's also why even in the unitary plan, again, Councillor Lee is right, we do have some prohibited activities, but the main one that we have is the demolition of Category 1 heritage buildings, i.e. at a national level, actually, they are the most important buildings in New Zealand and therefore the ones that are based in Auckland. That is prohibited. That has been able to be argued thus far through the courts. It is our advice, both mine, my team's, and legal advice, that we believe it will be very difficult to meet that threshold for this kind of activity. Clearly, the only way we could be absolutely certain, of course, is to go through the process. But we are just providing you our very clear advice that we don't think that it would stack up, and that there would be a lot of particularly legal, but also technical noise, probably environmental, various other levels of expertise that will be required to prove that through both a hearing process and ultimately the courts. And therefore, we are trying to tell you we don't think this is a viable option and therefore good value for money in terms of prohibition status. That doesn't mean we shouldn't look at the issue. We will do that, but we would not be recommending prohibition.
And so a full review could come out with a position of prohibition, but then by then we would have had, as in my understanding, that we'd have a look at all regulations and all ways to do it. And it, I guess, talking to you, is it correct that if it failed, we're back to square one and we've missed the whole review? So we couldn't get all the little improvements that may actually help?
I don't expect that through this broad review that we would still come up with prohibition, but we might come up with something else, something like non-complying activity or something, you know, that's been mentioned a few times. But again, that's a policy decision that we would come back to you and say this is more arguable, or yes, we believe we could support this if you wanted to change it. I still don't believe we would come back with prohibition. You've asked us in March last year to prioritise this in the review and to look at the settings and whether they're right. So that is what we would do. I don't see us coming back with prohibition for the reasons I've tried to outline.
Kia ora, thank you. Right, into debate. Are there any, Councillor Ferry, sorry, you've got some additional.
Yeah, so I've got an amendment by way of addition, which I have sent to the mover and seconder. And the seconder has indicated they're okay with adding them on. So it adds on a 6 and 7 VI and VII.
Is Councillor Lee supportive of?
I don't know. I think we might need to have them up on the screen.
I've never seen this. I've never heard about it before.
Oh, so apologies, Councillor Lee. Councillor Ferry has been emailing it to you, but you may have missed through the debate. We might just take a quick 5-minute break to discuss that with Councillor Lee. Otherwise, it will be an amendment by addition as opposed to adding it in. Or would you? Is that what you'd prefer, Councillor Lee?
Maybe we take the adjournment to have a look at it. Yeah.
Just 5 minutes.
That's okay. Thank you.
afternoon.
Right. Kia ora, everyone. Right, so we have the addition that was proposed by Councillor Ferry but has been incorporated to Councillor Lee and Councillor. Notice of motion. You can see them on what around the methods to more effectively measure to the consent. Correct word. Ask around giving residents clearer pathways to lodge complaints. We obviously do have complaints, but there is concern around that is not easy, and the complaints don't get followed up in the correct way. But we are working on that behind the scenes. And then E, which is noting the need to integrate the Hauraki Gulf Island District Plan with the Auckland Unitary Plan at a later date, which is what we all approved last year. So it's essentially just reiterating that again. And then staff prepare the plan change to amend that Rule 13.8.2 to add the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement as a matter of discretion to be considered in the helipad consent applications, which we believe we can do discreetly and very simply, and it's nowhere near the cost of the other plan change. And then confirm that the Hauraki Gulf Island District Plan amendments will be funded as part of the Unitary Plan review budget, which, as far as I know, is already in the budget. So that's reconfirming that. So I would like debate on this, so we can debate the whole motion. But I will note that personally, I will be asking it to be split into two, because people have said they would like to vote for parts. So I will work that out at the time. Member Henare, did you have a debating point? We've moved into debate, or is that a question?
More of a comment, but I'll wait till this is over and then reserve my right to have a comment right at the end.
Okay. So Councillor Lee has had his turn to debate. Is there anyone else who would like to debate this? I've got no speakers at the moment. Oh, Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, look, difficult one for me, eh? I feel like in an almost impossible position because, you know, I do hear the concerns of the residents involved here. I don't really want to minimise that at all. I can say that even though it's necessary, the Eagle helicopter is over my house most nights, and a lot of places in my ward. Never mind the scourge of siren battlers and all kinds of things as well that inhibit the ward over summer. So, you know, I know firsthand and kind of secondhand through my constituents how this can be a challenge, and we do want to address it as soon as we can. So, however, look, I feel like some of us here are on a bit of a wider mission to fix decades of housing planning disasters in the city that have left large parts of the best available land for housing still prohibited, locking 99% of Auckland's residents out of some of that best land, any hope of moving in and setting up their lives. We have a process to address that situation, and that will be embarked upon in July, and I really welcome that. You know, and this mission does include fixing the issue of our repeated building and flood plans. We're still building in dangerous areas. And I'm kind of feeling like I can't risk delaying that work. I feel like my constituents would not allow me to do that. I feel like their concerns of addressing that is really important and needs to be prioritised as well. The only other issue I have with it, with respect, I can't sign up to take on costly legal risk. I mean, part of the discussion today was around tourism operations. That's companies, right? Companies that can sue people. And I'd imagine that tomorrow they'll be calling their lawyers if we pass this today. You know, when you're messing with that, and you know, sometimes we choose to mess with that. Sometimes we choose to go down that path, but you do need very strong advice and a holistic approach to the wider problem to make things defensible. And that holistic approach, thankfully, is being embarked upon in a few short months. I think we should trust that process. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Chair, Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, Chair. Supporting what Councillor Henderson said, actually, and taking more of a pragmatic approach with the knowledge that I have of the workload that's coming through to our committee, Chair. And as I mentioned before, the significant work that we're having to turn around in 2 and 3 days back to central government on changes to the MPS, let alone the important work that we're doing around natural hazards, Plan Change 78, and seeing as how we are now in the year where the planning will start for the Auckland Unitary Plan refresh, I can't support bringing this piece of work forward. I mean, we all supported this in March 2023, except for me actually, who voted against prohibition based on the legal advice. But other than that, we're supportive, and it is in a process. It's being planned, it's being funded as part of that piece of work. Thanks, Councillor Ferry, for adding in your amendments that address issues raised by the Waitemata Local Board and Waiheke Local Board by Chair Handley. That's been really, really helpful. Thank you for that. So thank you, Councillor Lee, for your consistent battling for the ordinary Aucklander. You are consistent and you listen and you do your job well as a representative for them. So I won't be voting for A to C. I can support D to E. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll briefly speak before Councillor Watson. Yeah.
I guess my attitude to this one would be a bit different if it weren't for the fact that this issue has been round for a number of years now. I can remember some fairly passionate debate in the last term of council, and it would appear that things haven't really changed too much. In fact, if anything, they appear to get worse. We now have a situation in respect of this notice of motion where we have 3 local boards want this plan change progressed, and I note from their submissions that that was unanimously passed in each of those local boards. So that's a very powerful message from the other arm of the Auckland Council governance sector. I don't necessarily take a lot of comfort from the comment that really and people have referred to this work starting later in the year, but what was also said by the Chief of Strategy is that they wouldn't be starting the helicopter work in the middle of the year, and then we had, once again this reference to cost. So with all due respect to some of the people who have talked thus far, there seems to be a lot of barriers getting put up to really just keep pushing this out. And I'll refer to what we are pushing out here. One of the local board people in an email that I assume went out to a number of councillors referred to the excessive repeated noise, which has a huge impact on the well-being of residents, and it's unfair to impose this burden on people living in residential neighbourhoods on our coastline. Councillor Lee referred to ear-shattering noise. This isn't just the type of activity that can be glossed over if you're one of the affected parties. That has an ongoing and immediate impact on people's life. Councillor Lee referred to safety issues, and actually when I reflected on that, and given some of the events around the world, when you think of helicopters coming into residential areas, we're surrounded by other houses, people, and over beaches. As acquaintance of mine in Herne Bay, I'm not exactly in the habit of spending too much time in Herne Bay, but a friend of mine lives up there, and he was talking about his daughter and their friends and their experience just down at one of the beaches in Herne Bay when this helicopter comes in. So this is happening now. We've had it in our suitcase for 3 years, and the response today is to push it out, but to push it out with no real guarantee that work's going to get picked up in any timely fashion at that point. So I'm going to support Councillors Lee and Leone here and the 3 local boards who they're speaking on behalf, and no doubt the wider community that are affected by this, because really, and to quote the individual I was talking to, that there's a perception in the community that, you know, the council's not willing to take on the big boys and girls, and by default that means, well, just suck it up, you know, just suck up the ear-shattering noise, or that repeated noise for little kids as a helicopter comes buzzing over. That's not what we're meant to be here for. I don't necessarily agree with the notion that that cost factors can just be drawn out of the hat when it suits. I remember back to the infamous marina strategy that was just shot down on a cost, again on a cost basis. Same argument, it almost can be used to defeat anything then. This is an important point. It's here and now. It's been ongoing. We have a plea from the local board and the councils affected to do something to progress it. Within the wording that's there, there's the ability to do that and to send a signal to the various departments of council that this is a priority, that there should be a response to it, and to actually, more importantly than anything, to be responding to this long-standing concern of residents that continues to go unresponded to in any meaningful fashion. So I'll be supporting this. I think the arguments that have been put up, in respect of other, the Eagle helicopter, the Westpac rescue helicopter, for goodness sake, taking dying or injured people to the hospital, or the police trying to chase down a crook, that's not what we're talking about here. They're essential services. These other helicopter trips are not essential, but they're having an effect on the communities that are impacted by them. So I'll be supporting this notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Member Henare, would you like to speak now?
Chair, thank you. Just a couple of points. One, I always worry when we do things in isolation, and for better or worse, there might be some unintended consequences down the line. And I would rather that the council as a whole got its A into G in terms of a complete plan of attack on the issue of the ins and outs of helicopters. Secondly, I can't see a hell of a lot of consultation with iwi Māori, short of Councillor Lee saying he spoke to somebody last week, which is, in my opinion, not good enough. I also worry, and I just got to agree with Councillor Henderson about where's our focus. Where is the focus on the mitigating of what happened a year ago, and also the building of thousands and thousands of houses that we need so our people can get in and get a house, to get a home. I think this is a distraction, admittedly a distraction that's been going on for far too long, but a distraction nonetheless. And I will, short of voting no, abstain on this. Thank you.
Kia ora, Member Henare. Next, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. I won't speak for too long because I think my comments have largely been captured by Councillor Watson, but we all bring our memories into this debating chamber, and this debate is reminiscent for me of my time in Parliament when the prohibition of mining on the Coromandel was a hotly contested issue where pressure was put on communities to constantly be fundraising. When it was brought up, it was always suggested that the Crown Minerals Act and the RMA would deal effectively or more effectively and more comprehensively with the issue. But ultimately, it left those communities with uncertainty. And it took leadership at that time, and it occurred in a non-partisan way between Sandra Lee, Judith Tizard and myself to get that before a select committee that it could actually be dealt with effectively. And I don't hear anybody today talking about repealing that piece of legislation. So for me, it's about leadership. We will hear endless arguments to and fro on why we shouldn't do something, but on something as fundamental as this that has a huge impact on the environment, I applaud Councillor Lee for taking leadership on it, and I will be supporting him today.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I had written a very long set of bullet points and a long speech, and as Councillor Henderson spoke, I crossed each and every one of them off. So I am completely ditto exactly the words of Councillor Henderson, and I will be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor. That was very frank and straight to the point. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. Look, as I alluded to in my questions, and as you well know, Chair, you and I have been working on this for a while to review helipad locations and the activity status, but not just the activity status, the underpinning assessment criteria and rules, etc. But what I point out is the way the motion is written at the moment is not taking an Auckland-wide view. So some of the zones that I want to let you know, and these are just some of the zones that are not covered by this, are zones like Rural Conservation Zone, the Rural Waitakere Ranges Zone, the Waitakere Foothills Zone. These are really sensitive environments. The Coastal Marina Zone, the Coastal Transition Zone, Special Purpose Zone, the Green Infrastructure Corridor Zone, Business Metro Centre Zone. Now that's where all the vertical living is happening. It's residential living, but it's not in a residential zone. It's in a metro zone. And if you can think Newland, Monaco, Takapuna, Newmarket, and the list goes on. So those people are not being cared for in this motion. You've got the open space zones, all of them are not covered by this. So my plea, and look, I've been, you and I, Chair, have been pushing this with the Chief of Strategy for a couple of years, is that we definitely do get stuck into this and have an Auckland-wide lens on the review of helicopter movement. And of course, that doesn't limit it to the activity status. That's not what you do in planning. You look at the activity status, and then you look at, well, what discretion do you have to take into account certain things? You know, what is it in your assessment criteria? You need to look at all of that too, all the underpinning rules. And then I would suggest that when we get to helicopters, Chief of Strategy, that we actually need to really start to refresh and look at the impact that drones and other vertical aircraft that have arrived and will arrive, how we actually take that into account in the review of so-called helicopter activity and helipads, because there's a whole new arrival of vertical transport, and it'll be of people soon, and they won't be called helicopters, they're called drones, and we know all about that now. So at the moment, this wording is limited to helicopters. Well, there's a whole other area that we need to take into account now, and I would anticipate that our review leads into that as well. So for that reason, I think we need to wait and do it holistically, do it through an Auckland-wide lens, and capture all the various areas that I've just given you a sample of that are outside of what this notice of motion intends to be limited to. This does address, you know, people of Herne Bay and other places in the islands, but it omits so many Aucklanders and the impact that helicopter movement and landing and takeoff has on them.
Kia ora, Councillor Darby, thank you. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I just wanted to note a couple of things about what's happened since the resolutions a year ago. So we did have I'm just trying to open the right window. We did have an update on some of that action, and some of it's actually been somewhat encouraging. Clearly we wouldn't have this in front of us and wouldn't have 3 local boards asking for change if we'd solved it. But I would just note that one of the things we passed last time was and I just want to get the word right, implement National Planning Standard 15. And we voted on that on the 30th of March. That was updated in the district plan on the 20th of April. And so that's some reasonably quick action from council in my experience. And since then we've had 8 complaints, acknowledging there is an issue with the wording around the complaint system, which is why that is covered up there. And those complaints were, as Councillor Darby points out, quite regional in nature: Devonport, Coatesville, Waterview, Howick, Albany, Takatu, Baddeley's Beach and Takapuna. So, yeah, I just wanted to make the point around that that potentially has had some impact, but there is further to go on the journey. I'd also note the Civil Aviation Authority has undertaken and hopefully commenced, because they said they were going to start in December, a review of their areas of responsibility, because we only have takeoff and landing. And we've talked quite a bit about flight paths and the noise in flight, and that does sit with the CAA. So pleased to see that they're hopefully picking that up. And particularly the issue about mandatory responders, which was a big matter last time we talked about it. Responders, transponders, one of those words. So I've learnt a lot about helicopters in the last year and a half, but still not an expert. So what I wanted to point out is in regard to D&E, you know, we've had a number of speakers against the earlier part of the motion. I'm not sure how they feel about D&E, but that's okay. I guess we'll find that out soon. But part of the point here is that awareness that the first part of the motion is potentially quite controversial, wanting to make sure that we do get something through for these local boards in particular and these local communities. So noting that they did have, in particular Waitemata in their February resolutions, requests around compliance and enforcement of compliance, and so that's the origin of D. And Waiheke had E, and I suspect, but I might be overreaching here, that also applies for barrier. Not sure. Looking at Lizzie and Izzy, sorry, and she's nodding. So I'm hopeful that if the first part doesn't pass, if the second part will pass, and that will give these local boards in their communities some ways forward. Noting that we are looking there in EA. At a much smaller scale plan change, which could happen alongside the earlier one if the earlier one passes, or could happen separately, so if it fails. So just wanted to make those points. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to Councillors Lee and Leone for accepting those additions. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Chair. I've gone to this open-minded, Chair, and listened to all the pros and cons, and there are lots of pros and lots of cons about supporting Councillor Lee's notice of motion. I think we've had some very good advice from officers, both in terms of ability to cope with extra workloads or build those into programs if there was the political will to support Councillor Lee's motion. We've also been warned about potential legal costs, and if we try to put fully prohibitive zones right across Auckland. So looking into my conscience, I've decided how I'm going to vote on this. I think it boils down for me, Councillor Lee, that you've stood up, perhaps bravely, wanting to support local democracy, and you began your presentation to us along those lines. You're trying to represent the voices of your constituents. You're trying to support the voice of your local boards, let alone one, but three. You're wanting to support the voice of democracy and the voice of Aucklanders. We've heard that this would go out for public consultation. There would be opportunity for Aucklanders to comment on that. There'd undoubtedly be advice around the prohibited zonings as well. So because of that, because of your stand and your point of principle here, and particularly I'm going to support your notice of motion, and I'm also going to support right through to E.
Thank you, Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Chair. I feel like I've been away for a week and I've come back in a parallel universe. Morris Williamson agreeing with Shane Henderson. It's quite significant. Look, can I firstly just commend Mike and Kath in the way in which they've presented, and I just want to acknowledge Izzy, who's from Aotea Great Barrier, sitting at the back there quietly. But look, I'm really struck, and I just want to acknowledge Julie too for those for D and E. But A, B, and C sit uncomfortably for me, and I get the issue. I live next door to a neighbour who has a helipad, and beside a gliding club with a 350 Chevy motor in their tow plane, and in the flight path of Ardmore and Auckland Airport. So I know, experience a little bit of noise from up above, so I get it. But I am really nervous about the use of notices of motion in this for such a important and what would normally be such a robust process. And I use a word, and I sort of revert back to a word that Mike uses a lot in this room. It doesn't have enough rigour for me to support A through to C. I will be supporting, and I like D and E, so I'm glad that you're prepared to split those out, Chair. There's not enough there for me. I'm nervous about notices of motion that cut across really good process, and people know I sort of like a good process. So won't be supporting A through to C, sorry Mike, but and Kath and Izzy, but we'll be supporting D and E because we need to do something.
Thank you, Councillor. Last speaker before I wrap up and go back to Councillor Lee, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone. Sorry I was late in. I have read this stuff on Nexus and listened to what has happened since the break. I am too quite conflicted with this. Living on the north head of the Manukau Harbour, under the fringe of the Waitaki Ranges, and having plenty of craft to go over us in the flight path of the airport, let alone tourism helicopters, and now drones coming off the beach and having a fly around. I understand it completely, and I do not want to, I understand the three boards are unanimous, but I also have listened to everybody here about how complex this is, and it's gone back a lot further than my history. I think I will be abstaining on this because I don't have enough understanding of the matter to make a proper, considered decision. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, and thank you for that. And that is part of the issue with the notice of motion, Councillor, is that this is so complex that we don't have the officers and technical, apart from thankfully Megan could, but to give us the advice on this. Thank you, Councillor Lee and Councillor Leone, and our board chairs that are here, Izzy and Kath and Alex. I know you're... Yes, I acknowledge Izzy. So thank you for coming over. We did go through a lot of this last year, and I think that's why I'm a little bit... I was a bit concerned that this came back because we all, not all, but we actually, nearly all of us, agreed with the way forward, which was to add that National Planning Standard 15, which is since that decision, we actually haven't had any applications or processing of, not that it may be the cause, but just in the last year we haven't had any consents in the residential area. We also were very clear that this had to be done as a full review, and we agreed and debated for quite a long time, I think about 4 hours like today. We agreed that it would be going full for the full review, and everyone who's spoken today did agree with that way forward. So to have this come back and remove that decision that we made together last year is a bit frustrating. I do understand the frustration of the residents and those who want this to happen faster, but my concern is we've had strong advice, and I've asked for legal advice and everything else outside this meeting, that we will spend hundreds of thousands, potentially millions, on a process that will likely fail, and we will likely not have technical experts supporting the council's position, which is very difficult to do a plan change without technical advice or without the ability to stand up and back us on these decisions. What we did decide last year was to have that full review, which could have a multitude of different changes to the rules, to the regulatory impacts, to the zoning, across all parts of Auckland, as Councillor Darby says, that wouldn't leave out the areas that Councillor Turner just spoke about, which are left out of this decision. So a full review, and I assume the full review will not go ahead in the middle of a judicial process like a plan change. So not only will we have a plan change that's likely to fail and cost us a lot of money and delay many other plan changes, we will also lose the ability to do the full review through the unitary plan when we bring the Hauraki Gulf Island District Plan in, because you cannot be doing those same very public things at once. So that will be a huge loss, I think, to the decision we made last year and the work with the local boards at the time to ensure that. I won't be supporting A, B and C, so we will be splitting those out so people can have the choice. But of course I will be supporting, and thank you Councillor Lee for accepting Councillor Ferry's positions there. And this has been the feedback that I've heard from community and from local board members, has been about these things. We have changed as much as we could from the resolutions last year, but these will continually improve. If we do that small minor plan change to add the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, that will add another layer of environmental things we can look at to prevent helipads in the interim while the full review is happening. So, and we definitely need to, and I've had regulatory team and compliance email me other evidence this morning and yesterday around the tools we need to be doing the current, dealing with the current helipads. But as Councillor Ferry says, we've also had to push that out to the CAA because we don't actually have decision making over some of this. So I'm sorry, Councillor Lee, I know desperately you want to get this outcome for your communities, and Councillor Darby and I and others have been working on this for a long time to try and progress, but I feel like we have to do it the full review way to get the best outcomes. And I can think of nothing worse than A, delaying hazard plan changes that people are demanding, and B, ending up through a very expensive process that we lose and end up with no change at all. That will take about the same amount of time anyway when you're looking at a 2 to 3 year process. So I'm sorry that I can't support that. It is not a binary that I suddenly support helicopters. I don't know anyone who owns a helicopter, or I've not been in a helicopter in Auckland ever in my life. But this is about making sure the process is right, and we're continually to improving it for Aucklanders. And I feel the move straight to prohibition for a whole region, the advice is we just will not get that through, and we will waste a lot of money. Councillor Lee, you've got a right of reply.
And I'll be brief, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and members for the largely constructive contribution to the debate on this very important matter. I just want to pick you up, Mr. Chairman, on the resolution we passed just about 1 year ago, and why we have come back again. The resolution, the key part of it was to request that the officers report back on how a plan change to give effect to option 4, which is prohibited in residential areas, could feasibly be included in the budget for future public and private plan changes for the Hauraki Gulf District Plan and the Auckland Unitary Plan. The assumption of most people who support it was the budget was the forthcoming budget, that was the one we signed off later that year on the 30th of June, but at least in this budget we haven't really seen that, and that's why with the problem ongoing we brought it back. Myself and the 17 other local board members, that was our unanimous view. In regard to the concerns raised by Councillor Darby, he did, to be fair, mention this to me when I was intending to bring a notice of motion to change the situation on the Aotea Great Barrier. He suggested a regional approach, and that is what we have done in effect. If you think about it, the status quo throughout the region on the mainland in the Auckland Unitary Plan is non-complying, and in the Gulf, restricted discretionary. We want to, that is no longer satisfactory, and having two different activity classes for the same activity it is not really sensible planning in our view. Now, in terms of prohibited activity, and this may be a fault in the wording of the resolution, most of the zones that Councillor Darby ruled out from the Unitary Plan already activity, helicopter activity or landing, more to the point, helipads are already prohibited by way of civil aviation rules. There's no chance of getting a helipad in your backyard in Mount Eden or Henderson or, you know, inland of, you know, Forest Hill or something like that. Civil aviation prohibit that. The only place where you can have a helipad is if you have a coastal property in the Unitary Plan, so that you can approach it by sea. So perhaps it should have been residential areas in the coastal environment. But the staff, we have expert planners here, and they know full well what the implications of this are. Now, Member Henare questioned my comments about the Ngāti Rehua, Ngāti Waiti Aotea Trust Board. I will refer him to Mr. Opo Ngāwaka and the Management Committee. If he also refers to the attachment to the resolution, the real concerns of Ngāti Rehua are referred to in the Aotea Great Barrier Local Board resolution, where it says in 9, highlight the Hauraki Gulf Islands plan originally allowed helipads due to limited aircraft infrastructure. However, alongside Mana Whenua, and the Aotea Great Barrier Local Board is working and consulting with their neighbours, Mana Whenua, all the time. We believe the existing Claris and Okiwi airfields offer sufficient accessibility. I'll just make that point. Moving on. In the end, members, it comes down to where there's a will, there's a way, and if there's not a will, we have the status quo, which has dragged on for years. I talked about the resolution of 1 year ago. I want to go back another year, 2 years ago, and there was further controversy about this issue, and it was a time when Councillor Darby was chair of the Planning Committee, and there was some criticism of the council, but the council tried to reassure the public that there would be a region-wide study to investigate the activity of helipads and helicopter uncontrolled chopper flights and so on. The study would run alongside staff taking another look at which consent category was best for helipads, said Planning Committee Chair Councillor Chris Darby. We're by no means kicking this topic to touch at all, Darby said, and that was 2 years ago, and the danger is if we don't go along with this and we don't support the local boards, this really is kicking it for touch again, going through the Unitary Plan and finding every zone in the plan, reading them out and saying we're not covering that. That is, in effect, looks like, may not be meant, kicking for touch. So I just want to say one more thing, Mr. Chairman, and that is it comes down to democracy. It comes down to the relevance of this governing body. And I note with deep interest the words of our new Chief Executive, Phil Wilson, who advised the members of the governing body that he wanted this organisation to be more democratic, to be more democratically led. And he felt that that was a way for this council to build bridges with the people of Auckland, who at this stage tend to be somewhat cynical and alienated from the council and its CCOs.
Councillor,
a more democratic council,
Councillor,
and this is what I'm asking for your support today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, we will vote on A to C, was it? Yep. So all those in favour?
We're doing a division.
Oh, are we? Okay, I didn't know if a division had been called or not. Right, we're doing a division on A to C, first part.
Thank you, members. You're voting on the motion on the screen. Councillor Hills?
No.
Member Ashby?
Abstain.
Councillor Baker?
No.
Who's it?
Councillor Bartley?
No.
Mayor Brown?
I heard him just then. Mayor Brown, we heard you come off mute and then...
We can come back to him. Councillor Deputy Chair Dalton?
Against.
Councillor Darby?
No.
Councillor Ferry?
Against.
Councillor Fletcher?
For.
Councillor Fooley?
For.
Member Hinare?
Abstain.
Councillor Henderson?
No.
Councillor Lee? Councillor Leone?
For.
Councillor Newman? Not here. Councillor Sayers?
For.
Councillor Stewart?
Against.
Councillor Turner?
Hello?
For.
Councillor Walker?
For.
Councillor Watson?
For.
Councillor Williamson?
Against.
And if we can go back to Mayor Brown?
He unmuted again.
No.
3 hours, all the voices in the chat. If you come up to me in the last few minutes and said, I just need 3 hours and 30 minutes, it's too much. Just pace yourself. You've got 2.5 hours to go. Nobody ever really wants any more because it's 3 o'clock, so that's just a little.
Do you want to just mute that, whoever
We've got Megan
is on?
coming out, we've got.
So the motion was lost 8 votes to 10.
For the person that has invited you to this event and acknowledge how amazing they are.
We'll move to the next.
Thank you. So now we'll take a division on D&E.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, and I just go to the protocols that were made obvious to elected members a little while ago. Could you please refresh, because I'm not sure it's a genuine question, what the protocol is when it comes to votes and attending the item and then making a vote, because I have some concerns with the way the voting was recorded in that vote there. I wonder if the democracy advisors could tell me if there was any protocols that were made clear to councillors earlier in terms of voting and attendance at items.
Sorry, so through the chair, the current process is that members can attend the meeting via electronic link. They are classed as part of the quorum and they can vote accordingly, whatever they so fit. Does that answer your question, Councillor Watson?
I think it does if there's no other detail as to the attendance of those items, because there is a concern there, obviously.
Thank you, Councillor. I do wish that everyone could attend in person, but there are obviously very many people for various reasons that cannot attend.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just to make it clear, it wasn't people online, it's where people suddenly appear for a vote to register their vote, not the fact that people are online listening to the debate and participating in it in some instances.
Right. According to Sandra, the Mayor has been on the whole time. I don't know any other way to get everyone to debate, or normally there are a lot of people in cafes and different things listening online. I would prefer that is not the case. I'm not sure what noise we could hear, but the Mayor did try and come on 3 times, but whether he kept muting I'm not sure. Right, Councillor.
Just in terms of meeting management, I would sort of seek future direction, maybe not this question for today, but people coming in during an item as well. I would say that if the concern is so, we need people to be here for questions and debate the whole thing.
Yeah, I have asked personally after multiple issues last year that we have a review of these, and that hasn't been, because it often happens at this committee where inappropriate things, unfortunate things happen, especially with the online. So I think there's a broad number of things that need to be addressed. That is up to all of us. That Phil Wilson has told me it is up to us to deal with those, change standing orders, change the way we're working, etc. So happy to have a workshop together on that. Right, we'll move to the next.
One question, Mr. Chairman. In regard to the standing order about amendments not constituting a direct negative, in regard to amending a resolution by addendum, if you will, with the consent of the original mover, but then voting against the resolution or the motion that you were amending, is that not really in effect another way of having a direct negative against that motion?
Can I have a point of order? Are we not in the middle of a vote?
Yeah, we are in the middle of a vote, and I'm sorry, Councillor Lee, I shouldn't have allowed all of these questions, but I did, and apologies, Councillor Darby, we're in the middle of a vote. So I'll take the, is it D to E, now by division.
Thank you, members. So you are voting on the additional clauses moved by Councillor Lee, which is on the screen now. Councillor Hills.
Yes.
Member Ashby.
Abstain.
Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Bartley.
For.
Mayor Brown. Mayor Brown. Councillor Dalton.
For.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Ferry.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Foley.
For.
Member Henare.
Abstain.
Councillor Henderson.
Yes.
Councillor Lee. Councillor Leone.
For.
Councillor Newman is still not present. Councillor Sayers.
For.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Turner.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson. Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
We'll try Mayor Brown again. Not present.
Thank you, councillors. We will. We want to go obviously for a break, but we might move quickly. Oh, sorry, I declare that carried. Thank you very much for the debate on this very important issue. We'll move quickly to the Pukekohe operative, because that should be a quick before we go to lunch. Where are we? Item 14, is it? Yes, item 14. And Katrina, kia ora.
Through the chair, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Katrina David tōku ingoa. This is just a really quick one. The purpose of this item is to make Plan Change 87 operative in the unitary plan. Plan Change 87 is a private plan change which rezones just under 8 hectares of land in Pukekohe from the future urban zone to the general business zone. The plan change also introduces a new precinct to address transport and roading matters, and also applies the stormwater management area overlay to manage effects on increasing impervious areas. A panel of independent hearing commissioners has made the decision to approve the plan change with modifications following the public submission and hearing process. The decision on the plan change was publicly notified and was not appealed, so the plan change can now be made operative with the approval of this committee.
Kia ora, thank you very much. Very straightforward. I'll just, Councillor Baker would like to move and Councillor Dalton would like to second. Are there any questions? Thank you. Doesn't look like there are any questions. Thank you, Katrina. You can head back to what you were doing. Kia ora, thank you very much. Is there any debate on this one? Councillor Baker, did you want to say anything on this? No? Very simple. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Thank you. We'll be back at 1:25, so we've got some lunch. Thank you.